It's another surprising twist in an ongoing legal saga for a man who faked his death, adopted a new name, and developed another accent, all just to avoid rape charges.
Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay.
We've been covering the case since the once fugitive was extradited back to the United States. Of course, I'm talking about Nicholas Rossi, who at one point went by Arthur Knight Brown.
And today, Mr. Rossi does not deny that Arthur Knight and Nicholas Rossi are in fact the same individual.
Rossi was previously on the run for a pair of rape charges in 2 separate counties in Utah stemming from 2008. Now, nearly 20 years after the crimes, Rossi is heading to trial. Rossi is accused of raping a 21-year-old woman in Salt Lake County in 2008, and prosecutors say he raped a former girlfriend after an argument in Utah County in September of that same year. According to reports, the woman only identified as KP said the two met on MySpace 4 months earlier. She reportedly told investigators the two broke up weeks before, blaming the breakup on Rossi's aggressive behavior and money he owed her. She said Rossi invited her over, claiming he would pay her back. But during that meeting, he allegedly unzipped his pants and exposed himself to her. When she told him to stop, Rossi allegedly pushed her onto the couch and removed her clothes. She said she told him no nearly a dozen times before he raped her. After, the woman claimed Rossi blocked the door, preventing her from leaving. But then he got distracted by a text message and she was able to escape. But Rossi's alleged identity in the Utah County case didn't become clear until more than a decade later in 2017 because of a backlog of untested rape kits.
What kind of allegation was made in the Utah County case, and when did that allegation come from?
Okay, so the case in Utah County was a reported, again, sexual assault. And so the DNA from that sexual assault kit was submitted for testing under the Saki program, as I described earlier. And so that case required an investigation and follow-up, which then led to other information.
Okay. When and where was the sexual assault in Utah County alleged to have happened?
Best recollection, I'm sorry, it's been a minute since I've looked at it. It was 2008, I remember that. It was around the summer, the late spring, summer of 2008.
Okay. And was that in what city was it in?
Orem was the reporting agency.
Okay. So, and I'm sorry, I've just forgotten your answer. When did you, approximately when did you say you kind of took the lead in the investigation in that Orem case?
I don't remember the specific, but it was in 2020. It was like right on the cusp of December, January.
Okay. Did you hear, so I'm jumping forward in time now, did there start to be media attention about that investigation and the subsequent investigation later on?
Yes.
As a result of that media attention, did you hear from anyone in Salt Lake County?
I did.
Who did you hear from?
So in this case, and I'll be using initials or full name, or would you prefer?
State's preference would be initials.
Okay. So MS reached out and had indicated that she had had a relationship with the individual on the news media named Nicholas Rossi or Nicholas Alvarian. She knew him as Nicholas Rossi.
Okay. Did you interview her?
I did.
Do you remember approximately when you interviewed her?
I want to say it was January 14th, 2022.
Did she take you to see anything soon thereafter?
Yes.
What did she take you to see?
So, based on the description that she had given, we attempted to locate a house in the area of Salt Lake City where she believed that the individual Nicholas Rossi was living at that time.
And was she able to take you to a particular street, to a particular house?
She was.
Do you remember the address of that house?
853 Blair Street, as I recall.
Okay. And is that house in Salt Lake County?
Correct.
Okay.
According to investigators, by that time, Rossi left the U.S. for Ireland, first using the name Nicholas Brown and using an Irish driver's license, but police say it was a fake ID using a stolen document. He was later arrested in Glasgow, Scotland, years later in 2021, after being recognized at a hospital in Scotland while being treated for COVID-19. And by that time, he claimed it was a case of mistaken identity and that he wasn't Nicholas Rossi, but an orphan named Arthur Knight Brown. He fought extradition for years, but in August of last year, a judge in the UK ruled Brown or Rossi could be extradited to the States. And Rossi continued to keep up the act for nearly a year after being extradited.
Are you Mr. Rossi? Are you Mr. Rossi?
No, lady.
You might have to take that off just to get to talk so she
No,
can hear you.
lady.
Is that a yes? I'm having a hard time.
My name is Arthur Knight Brown.
I think I'm going to have the jail restate what he said. Having a really hard time hearing him.
What is it?
My name is Arthur Knight Brown.
He says his name is Arthur Knight
Brown.
Brown.
Arthur Knight Brown. Brown.
I can't hear. You want to have him state his name and date of birth?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
we can't hear him at all. Can you ask him, can you please state your name and date of birth?
Here, get a little closer.
Lady, my name is Arthur Knight Brown. My date of birth is 22nd of the 11th, 1986.
Okay,
I think we're having a problem with understanding who this person is.
this is not number 36.
Your Honor, we've got him as Nicholas Rossi, but he's saying his name is Arthur Knight Brown.
Oh, that's one of the AKAs.
This individual has been extradited, and he has not admitted his name or birth date accurately, and so I don't think we're going to be successful on that today either. It's also known as.
Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay, and I would ask your ladyship that the prosecution show cause for why they proceeded to allow
Mr. Knight, I'm going to...
whilst I had an appeal pending in the Supreme Court.
But all that changed in October when he finally admitted to the court Nicholas Rossi and Arthur Knight Brown were one and the same. Prior to escaping off to Europe, Rossi initially lived in Utah, then moved to Rhode Island, where he was a staunch critic of the state's Department of Children, Youth, and Families. So when he admitted his real identity, he claimed he adopted the fake name and made the new life for himself because of threats made because of his work to reform the foster care system.
The steps necessary to ensure that I was kept safe and later on to keep my family safe.
Still so much to unpack with this Nicholas Rossi case, as always. But I want to quickly give a huge thank you to our sponsors that help us continue to bring you these stories, like Odoo. I'm sure a lot of you watching this might be business owners or thinking about starting a side hustle. Well, Odoo can help. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software with tools to help you run your business. I mean, look, I'm a cat mom and I want my cat buttons to get some brand deals. Using Odoo's website builder, I built a site for my cat buttons in just minutes, thanks to easy tools like AI copywriting and drag and drop features. 5 minutes later, boom, check it out. I now have buttonsthecat.com. So I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring our videos. And for our amazing viewers, you can start building your site now and get a free domain for the first year with our link odoo.com/LCnews19. Again, that's odoo.com/LCnews19 to try Odoo now for free. At this time, it's unclear who the source of the threats came from, but Rossi pleaded not guilty to first-degree felony rape. But after the defense argued their client should be released on bail, the judge denied it for an obvious reason.
The thrust of the state's argument is that there is clear and convincing evidence that Mr. Rossi is likely to flee the jurisdiction of the court if the individual is released on bail. Having carefully considered the evidence presented, the court finds that the state has shown clear and convincing evidence that that is true. the disputed facts surrounding Mr. Rossi's departure from the United States and his return under extradition demonstrate that his likelihood to flee the jurisdiction of the court if released on bail is very highly probable. The court reaches that conclusion based on the following facts. At a time when the Alaverdi Foundation was under investigation for fraud, Nicholas Rossi departed the United States. He had a conversation with an FBI agent in which he indicated that he chose the country of his destination because Ireland would not extradite him. The FBI agent confirmed the departure of Mr. Rossi on an American Airlines flight in 2017. He left using a U.S. passport and disembarked in Dublin. The testimony is that on January 9th, Mr. Rossi was granted a sex offender reduction by the state of Rhode Island. The very next day, it was announced on the Alaverdi Foundation website that Mr. Rossi had cancer. Later in February, an obituary was posted for Mr. Nicholas Rossi, again in February of 2020, indicating that Mr. Rossi had died and had been cremated and buried at sea with only his wife and children as witnesses. 7 days before the obituary was posted, Mr. Rossi or someone posted on his social media account that he had married Miranda Knight. In fact, Mr. Rossi had not died. He continued to conduct his affairs in Europe. Mr. Rossi denied emphatically being Nicholas Rossi and claimed that he was Arthur Knight. Ultimately, that extradition process resulted in him being returned to the state of Utah, returned to the United States, and then to the state of Utah, where it was confirmed, and this is in the preliminary hearing transcript, it was confirmed that the DNA swab from the defendant was for Nicholas Rossi, and that DNA match is confirmed, and today Mr. Rossi does not deny that Arthur Knight and Nicholas Rossi are in fact the same individual. It is true that Mr. Rossi currently faces health circumstances that may make his flight from the United States more difficult, but I'm not persuaded that it would prevent that from happening, that those conditions would prevent that from happening. He has his wife in the UK that is providing him money on a periodic basis. That money can assist him in his potential flight. He has no ties to the state of Utah of any kind. He's facing a rape charge in Salt Lake County. These are strong incentives to flee the jurisdiction, and he has demonstrated his ability to do that in the past. For all of these reasons, the court finds that the state has met its burden of proof. I will order that Mr. Rossi be held without bail.
Now he'll have to wait in jail for a few more months before he learns his fate. In November, the defense and prosecution agreed to begin the trial in April of next year. That case will be the Salt Lake County rape case, where Rossi is accused of raping a 21-year-old woman. But in the Utah County case, where Rossi is accused of raping a former girlfriend, his attorneys are reportedly working with prosecutors on a plea agreement. However, if they can't reach a deal, that case is also heading to trial in September of next year. We're slowly inching toward a year since Rossi's been back in the U.S. after his extradition. Now it's possible he could be heading to trial. Let's break it down with criminal defense attorney Kesia Early. Kesia, thank you so much for joining me today. You know, this case really has been ongoing for so many years. The original offense took place in 2008. Rossi is set to head to trial next year. What could a case like that look like, especially since it's been so many years?
Well, usually when you're dealing with sexual assault cases, it really lies down to the credibility of the witnesses because typically with these type of cases, there's no independent witness, so you really have to believe either the alleged victim in this case or the defendant. And the defendant has some serious problems with his credibility, also with his history of sexual offenses in the past. So I do believe that there is extreme amount of circumstantial evidence as well as the credibility of these witnesses that can definitely do him harm and lead to a guilty verdict.
And it's possible also that Rossi could take a plea in one of the cases. Do you think both sides could come to a decision on it? And if so, how likely do you think that it'll be that he'll actually take that plea deal?
So with these type of cases, typically the victims are willing to cooperate, but then as it gets closer to trial and they realize I'm going to have to relive this entire situation and testify before a jury, there's times where a plea negotiation can be fulfilled. But there's a process because typically the prosecutors first have to negotiate and discuss a plea resolution with the alleged victims in the case, and then they would have to have their input and possibly agree, and then that plea negotiation is presented to the defendant, and the defendant makes that determination as to whether or not they will accept the plea or reject the plea and go forward to trial, which is why the last hearing, the judge really wanted to know, is he going to accept the plea at the upcoming court date, or will this case go to trial?
And I think when we talk about Nicholas Rossi altogether, from the very beginning to even right now, you can't help but talk about the prior bad act and that being him fleeing off to Europe. Could that be introduced into trial if it goes to trial?
That and much more. Here in South Florida, we call it the Williams Rule. And basically, that evidence can come in to prove a modus operandi or pattern of the defendant in this case. And not only that, he was a previous sex offender. So those past crimes, plus his evidence of flight, can be evidence of guilt. And then on top of that, again, his credibility is shot. He faked his death. He had anonymous family members print up a fake obituary. He flees out of the country. So, all of this can show the jury that not only is he inclined to lie on the stand, lie under oath, but there's a great possibility based on the evidence that he is guilty of these sexual assault allegations.
And I remember when we spoke previously, when Rossi did admit that he was, in fact, Arthur Knight Brown, he said that there were threats made to his life. How credible at this point do you think those threats were? Do you think it was all an act?
Of course. And that again is a lie because you have to think about if there's a threat on your life, you don't go into hiding, you actually reach out to law enforcement. So he did the complete opposite. He knew that there was a warrant out for his arrest because he failed to register as a sex offender, which goes back to his previous lie about faking his death and fleeing to another country. It makes no sense whatsoever. So again, what he's claiming is not true based on the totality of the circumstances. I'm pretty sure that he faked his death so that he hoped that not only would the sex offender charge of or his uh, ability to register as a sex offender would go away, but he would hope that all of the charges that stemmed from that last case from 2008, where they finally tested the DNA back in 2017, 2018, he thought that that case would go away. So now he has to face the music, and I do believe that there will be a global resolution because he has two pending cases. So oftentimes when you have pending cases in different counties, it becomes complex because you have to deal with different prosecutors. So there it does take time to negotiate these with the different victims, but I believe based on the offer, there's a great possibility he may accept it.
Now, Casey, you are a criminal defense attorney. Say Rossi is your client. You know, you have a lot to work with. I mean, last month he admitted in open court Arthur Knight Brown and Nicholas Rossi are the same person. He fled to Europe. You have one case where the victim is an ex-girlfriend. What type of defense are you putting on for his case if it goes to trial?
Well, typically with these sexual allegations or sexual battery, I look at the facts and evidence. And if the evidence is overwhelming with my client, I have a face to face conversation, a serious conversation. And I talk about the pros and cons of going to trial, but also the potential punishment, because some of these cases can stem up to technically a life sentence. And here in Florida, life is truly life. So we tend to try to mitigate, whether it's taking a psychosexual evaluation and presenting this mitigation packet to the prosecutor. Instead of just saying, hey, give us a number, I'm trying to convince the prosecutor, don't just give me a number, reduce that number based on the mitigation that I'm presenting to you. And mitigation can be anything. It can be recommendation letters from family members. It can be an apology letter, an admission, because technically, if you're taking a plea, you are admitting to the facts and circumstances if you're pleading guilty. So there's ways that you can mitigate. In a case like this, I would have a serious conversation and advise him that it may be best in this case to mitigate.
All right, Casey Early, I appreciate so much your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, where do you think the case goes from here?
There's a strong possibility that not one, but both of his cases will resolve, which is called a global resolution, right at the eve of trial, because typically our clients like to hold out to the last minute, hoping that there'll be a better deal. But then when they see that the end is inevitable, they typically fold. So I do believe that he is going to accept responsibility because he wants to avoid that long punishment.
All right, Casey, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Nicholas Rossi remains behind bars in the Utah County Jail on no bond. He's slated to have another hearing on December 17th to follow up on the plea offer. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.